Hello there, and welcome to the Drax Files Radio Hour with Joe Yardley. My name is Draxter Dupre. I'm again alone here today, kind of on vacation, as I've been saying, although the day job is starting to take over again out of nowhere. Oh well, season 1 of the Live to Tape show is officially over. Joe is somewhere in Berlin, and we will have her back on the regular Live to Tape show in early August. Now, great show today. Nonny de la Pena, who is the queen of immersive journalism, if not the sole proprietor of it, will give us an in-depth look at her amazing work. Prove that virtual reality can do more than the same old zombie shoot 'em up with goggles. Virtual reality is an empathy machine, Nonny will be saying in the following interview. If you've never seen anything she's done, Nonny creates these experiences where we as quote-unquote player witness very unpleasant things. An immigrant is beaten to death by border police. Syrian refugee children are begging for morsels of food. War, imprisonment, poverty, those are her subjects. And these projects force us as witnesses to think a little bit deeper about these issues, much deeper than a headline, or maybe even a well-researched piece of traditional journalism can. Nonny exhibits these pieces at the Tribeca Film Fest. She was at the Sundance Festival with the Hunger in Los Angeles project. And Nonny started 7 years ago in Second Life with the Virtual Guantanamo project, through which I met her back in 2007. So this is a wide-ranging discussion about the possibilities of virtual reality and immersion. And we also meet a young pre-billionaire Palmer Luckey on the way. He's somehow involved with this whole story. It's a small world. Stay tuned. Lots of contextual linkage, of course, on our blog to follow along. A couple housekeeping notes. Please subscribe to the show on Stitcher. You find the banner on the right. You can always call us, Skype, DraxFiles, email, radio@draxfiles.com, or send in-world messages if you want to get in touch. We are checking them, we are reading them, and if you call us with something important, then we will play it on the air. You can support this show by either becoming a sponsor with your own banner, if you have a Second Life business, or you can take out a voluntary subscription of only $100 Linden per month. Ping us in World, and we will give you a killer vintage microphone with a neat on-air sign that lights up when you pay, made by Chris Lehman of Botanical. Lastly, I want to mention that we will be live broadcasting Sunday, June 22nd at 1 p.m. for the occasion of SL11B. Yes, they convinced us to come out of hiding. Join us, amazing guests, and we will take a lot of audience questions. We will talk about Second Life, 11 years, and we're still here, and why are we here? So it's going to be a fascinating discussion. As I mentioned, special guests, perhaps not. You have to come and see. Location will be announced on the SL Profile feed as soon as we have it. And now let's listen to my interview with Nonny de la Pena, starting off with a brief biographical sketch how she came from old media to very, very new media.
I started out as a traditional documentary and filmmaker and journalist. I was a correspondent for Newsweek, and then I left Newsweek to make documentary films. Neither of them were quite scratching the itch I had. Then I won a grant from the MacArthur Foundation at the Bay Area Video Coalition, and the idea was to take a significant documentary film and bring it to the digital world. I had directed a film called Unconstitutional about all the civil liberties violations post 9/11. And I'd done a large section on Guantanamo Bay Prison. And I guess you can still be astonished today that Guantanamo Bay remains so off people's radar and that it continues sort of unfettered. So when I saw this application, it seemed to me it would be a really good place to do something on Guantanamo Bay Prison. So that's when Peggy Weil, who was a digital artist and was a visiting professor at USC, suggested that we build this together in Second Life. And as soon as I logged on to Second Life for the first time, that was it.
When you said build this together, what were your initial thoughts prior to knowing about Second Life? Did you envision sort of a game engine to do this with, or what were your first thoughts when you got this grant?
So I initially thought of it, could we do some sort of Guantanamo Bay game, something that could kind of immerse people in the facts and engage them in a way. I was very lucky that at Bayback they had Ben Batstone Cunningham to help us build stuff, and he had just come out of working at Linden Labs, so he really understood the technology really well. And as soon as he explained to me what he thought he could do, I knew what I wanted to do in terms of how could you make people feel like they were there and have a deeper understanding of what was going on at Guantanamo Bay. Like, here's a place that's inaccessible to most citizens and press, but we can build a virtual and accessible one and in a gaming platform that might be reaching audiences that weren't reading traditional newspapers or watching broadcast news. And this was a story that I felt needed to be, reach people in all directions. So once the virtual Gitmo piece was finished, I was invited to a lab in Barcelona called the Event Lab, which is run by Mel Slater and Maria Sanchez Vives, she's a neuroscientist, and he's one of the most renowned virtual reality researchers in the world. We wanted to try what would it look like, what would it feel like to put somebody in the body of a detainee. And in doing that, going to his lab, it was sort of amazing that by making people look at a virtual mirror and wear a breathing strap and see this virtual avatar in a stress position move when they did, and they'd look down and their knees would look like they're hunched up, and all this being done with the virtual reality goggles.
Real quick, before we move to the goggles, let's dwell a little bit on Gitmo and some of the issues of SL at the time, and then we'll move to the goggles. You had tremendous success with the virtual Gitmo piece, but there were shortcomings that had to do with the platform at the time, and I guess still are some shortcomings. What would you have wished was possible? Let me give you an example. You could teleport out of the prison at any point in time. So you basically created an experience where your avatar was put in the plane and then ended up in the prison, but you were able to kind of leave, I suppose.
I don't think that was a problem, because we interestingly, when we rebuilt the piece for the Laboral, for a digital museum in Spain, a technology museum, and we made it so the avatar was locked to the island. But people had to do something, so they changed their body type and took off her clothes. People needed some sort of authority over, what was happening to them. And I'm not so sure that was a problem with Second Life that you couldn't leave. I think really, to be honest with you, I think Second Life is just ahead of its time. And it's one of those things that got a number of adopters who understood what it meant to meet there and hang out there and have this as a cultural space. I mean, I used to show up on our Second Life build, the Gitmo, and there'd be like a professor from Canada who was bringing his students through, who I'd never met, knew nothing about, and all of a sudden I'd be giving a tour to students from, another city. Those kind of things were astonishing. I think for us, really, the drawback was we just couldn't afford to keep it up. We didn't have any money. The island itself were now being, getting expensive. We had donated land for a long time. But that moment of walking the land in Second Life for the first time, I mean, walking the distance and saying, wow, what is it like to really walk the prison? What does that mean to try to match the size of the prison and the feeling of the prison? Are they the same? How many cages do I need? And all that sense of trying to feel it with your body in this virtual space was this moment, a profound shift for me from, for the first time I kind of understood that this was the environment that I could tell incredibly powerful stories that were quite visceral. And the reactions to Gitmo were astonishing. I mean, I had this one woman, she was so upset that she was like wearing these in this green outfit, and she had on these ice skates, and she had like pointy, pokey things coming all out of her green clothing, and she took out a baseball bat and started slapping her hand, and she wanted to hit me. No, she couldn't really hit me because it's the virtual world, but the intensity of that moment signified the connection that people could have to this virtual world.
I was just going to say also with the avatar, and I mean, you're doing the similar things now, you're also in it as yourself, but in Second Life, I just want to point this out, you're also in it as yourself. Once you have that very strong connection to your avatar, who is your digital alter ego in that space, then you have that same connection as if it were yourself. I think a lot of people still don't understand that because they say, well, it's just a game character, but it's much more than that. Real quick, you said cultural space. So it's not only, I want to explain this for people who have never experienced it. In Second Life, basically, you were going through this experience as if you were a prisoner. But then also there was the component of an exhibit of poems of prisoners, and also you had meetings and events with lawyers where people could have discussions around the issue of Guantanamo, right?
I have to say, I look back at that moment and go, that was such an important moment, and yet we haven't really repeated that. And it's sort of a shame, because I think that was an incredible, again, way ahead of its time, where there was a conference being held on the issues around the prisoners at Gitmo, on the fact that they didn't have access to their legal records and what were their legal rights. And the conference was being held at Seton Hall Law School. And what we did is we made this arrangement that we were broadcast there at the conference. We were up on a screen, our virtual build. So anybody who attended our space in Second Life was also present in the hall at Seton Hall. And the idea is that we could ask questions as well as the audience who was sitting there. I don't know if I've seen that kind of gathering performed anywhere that I've been to. And I think that we will come back to that kind of an experience. I'm sure it'll have some shifts and changes, but that was a pretty amazing moment.
I have to say, in Second Life, the experiences and the events are still as rich, if not more so. However, it's sad to see a lot of people in the serious space and the whole legal community that was at one time embracing Second Life have left. There is a little. The SL Bar Association is still sort of halfway alive, and they do hold meetings and such. But that's just an aside.
You know, Minecraft is very Second Life-y. It's just in a different approach. Our kids are growing up very comfortable with having an avatar and having a digital representation of themselves.
And also, they demand to be able to customize the space, to shape the space. That is really significant, and Minecraft undoubtedly has done, I guess, what Second Life and Teen Second Life could have done, and they did it in a certain smaller scale. But that is very exciting to me, that this generation grows up not accepting something that any given game god just gives them. So I hope that they will shape these spaces in significant ways.
And not only that, but you know, I see our kids get together. There'll be 4 kids, and they all have their computer in their lap, and they're typically playing with each other in this space. It's just like, instead of having a board game in front of them where they're looking at their cards and they're looking at the screen, it's not that different. But they're socializing in the virtual world, and it's going to be a very comfortable place for them as adults to also do significant things. You know, it's just a funny thing, because when I had one of my colleagues at one point at a big faculty meeting when I was back at the journalism school say to me, "You can't do that. That doesn't work. We've tried it." Since that period of time, I've proven otherwise. But it's been an uphill battle. It's been a real uphill battle to say that we can do serious stories in virtual environments.
Yeah. We talk about this on the podcast all the time about just education and all sorts of forms. I mean, there is a very strong, want to call it old school or whatever, perception that anything that smells like a game just has absolutely no place in the classroom or in connection with something quote unquote serious, because it is supposed to be sort of escapism, and that's definitely shifting
with every minute, and it's like that right now. It's gone exponentially the other direction. I'm just finishing up an interview. I've got to get finished today for the MIT Media Tech Review, and I've been interviewed now by NPR and PRI. It's after interview, and so traditional media.
The Facebook Oculus effect.
In some ways, it's a shame to think that that's what it takes, but who cares?
Whatever it takes.
Yeah, whatever it takes. Who cares? And as far as I'm concerned, it's when it happened that week, I texted Palmer and just said, thank you, because I knew that moment was going to change my life. And it has. It's totally changed my life.
Okay, let's go sequentially to these other projects. Then you abandoned Second Life and...
No, I'm going to finish one thing about Gitmo. I rebuilt Gitmo in Unity, right? Because I wanted to make a platform that anybody could just access from the web. Because I knew that was always the issue for Second Life. You had to download the special software and people would be very whatever about it. So we built it in Unity. And I have to say, it's interesting. It's still kind of a nice museum in a way. But because people can't see their virtual body that they have this connection to get bound in the plane and see it in the cage, I think it misses some of the visceral piece. I just think that at a certain point when we're doing a combination of, a Second Life web-based thing, we're going to find that there's a really, really more and more visceral way in which we can continue to tell these stories. I mean, now I use a technology that I think is perhaps the most, I know. I've put thousands of people through these pieces now, and I can tell you it blows people's minds. It blows people's minds. There was a moment when I would have been saying, I think this will work or whatever, but not anymore. By putting people in virtual reality goggles and having them fully tracked so they can walk around. I mean, we know the Oculus games are amazing. They're sit-down games. But when I put you into, you can walk around, a fully tracked camera system, and they were using the Wide 5 goggles, which were created by Mark Bolus, who, brought in Palmer Luckey into his lab prior to Palmer going off to start the Oculus. Best goggles on the planet at the time, and they were very expensive, $40K a pop or something. What I did is I took a Freedom of Information Act transcript of an interrogation that was called torture by the Bush administration. And I took, what was the passive voice in the transcript, which was the sergeant told the detainee to sit down and stand up 3 times or something. And I turned it to an active voice with an actress shouting, sit down, stand up. And we did it as if it was playing through a wall, and we used a binaural recording. What you saw when you put on the goggles was, first you saw a detainee in a stress position, and then there was a fade to black, and then you started looking around, and there was a virtual mirror. When you turned your head, it would turn your head. When you turned your head, the virtual avatar that you saw would turn their head. They're breathing the same way. When you look down, your knees would look like they were up in a position. But what was amazing was that people were actually sitting upright in their chair, with just holding their hands behind their back. What they actually saw was they were sitting upright in a chair with their hands behind their back. But after being in this experience where they'd hear this interrogation coming from another room, where they would look in the virtual mirror and it would parallel their actions if they turned their head, if they looked down, if they looked right, but within a stress position. So we asked people, what was your body like at the end of this experience? And everybody reported that they were hunched over in a stress position when in fact they were sitting upright. So that was a moment for me, kind of an aha moment. Oh my God, this is so powerful. And in the meantime, Mel also showed me a piece that he had built working on the bystander effect. And it was with a researcher who had gotten access to footage of closing time at the pub. And they were analyzing why do bar fights break out. And they're finding that actually the more people who were there, the more likely it was that somebody would intervene. You can't really put people at a bar fight to see what they're going to do. So they created this incredibly realistic thing where you put on the head-mounted display, which were then the Wide 5 goggles, and you would find yourself in a bar, and this guy was on a stool, and another guy walks in wearing the wrong football jersey, and the guy would get off the stool, and it was like really well written, and the audio was incredibly powerful. They had great actors, and it just was so scary and violent. That was the moment when I went, oh my God, I can never build to have my audience sit in a chair, outside of a story again. That was an aha moment. And that's when I went back, and at that point I was at the Annenberg School of Journalism. And I went back to school and thought, I need to build an immersive piece. And this guy named Stanley Tolan was running a class called Hunger in the Golden State, in which students were going to do a very traditional sort of web and written reporting on hunger. They had people going to food banks and taking photographs, shooting video, writing text. And I wanted to do an immersive piece. So to do these immersive pieces, you really need a kind of linear story to unfold. And I had an intern, and we started recording audio at food banks. And then one day she came back to me in tears because she'd recorded the day. And it didn't take very long, to be honest. I mean, it took a little while, a couple of weeks, but that's small by documentary filmmaking standards, in which a guy had been waiting in the long line for food, and he had diabetes. His blood sugar dropped too low, fell to the ground in a diabetic coma. It was a really big scene. And then this woman tried to steal food. And the food bank woman, she's there by herself, and you can hear her, she's overwhelmed. She's just shouting, there's too many people, there's too many people. It just was so representative of how invisible or hungry are and how bad it really is. So that was the first piece that I built.
And the hunger piece, were you able to walk around there, or were you still a static bystander, so to speak?
You're a bystander, but you're able to walk around. You put on the goggles, and we're using these face-based, incredibly fast tracking cameras, and you're able to walk around freely. And it does this really crazy thing to your mind. Very quickly, you feel like you're there. It's like instantaneous. I've had people just yelp. They put on the goggles and they will yelp because they can't believe they have a body in another place. I mean, they know they're still here too, but they feel like they're there as well. And in that moment where you can't help this man, because guess what? That's really what happened. The story unfolded the way it unfolded, and you can't change the narrative in these pieces because they're linear journalism stories. And I've had people down on the ground trying to hold the guy's head, crying, people who pulled their cell phone out of their pocket to call 911 before they remembered where they were and then shoved it back in. The reactions have been astonishing. They were astonishing. I mean, they were astonishing to me.
Describe the scene real quick, because we're on the radio. So you have the goggles on, the goggles, and you have people are walking around in a space, and somebody's helping them with carrying the cables along.
Yeah, and making sure they don't walk into walls, because people will. They'll forget where their body is. So people are we're still tethered. We still have for a little bit longer. We're not wireless yet, just to make sure that the screen refreshes quickly enough. So when you turn your head one way, you see whatever it is you would see if you turn your head to the left or to the right. Because if it's too slow, that's what will make you nauseous. So I right now still rely on the cable until we can get wireless. So you're walking around this empty space. I mean, you can be in the, basically it's like a warehouse when I show it down at ICT, the USC's ICT McConnell lab that Mark Bolish runs. And it doesn't matter. People just go deep into that world so quickly. Hunger was made at a very magical, incredible moment. Mark Bolish had kind of gathered around him some extraordinary people, and that's why Hunger was able to be made, because I had no budget for it, and everybody contributed time and energy. And so, that's when Palmer Luckey was there as a lab assistant. And the Wide 5 goggles that Mark had been making, we had the last pair left in the lab, and I couldn't take them to Sundance. Once Hunger in Los Angeles got into Sundance, I needed goggles. And that's when Palmer was furiously working on goggles. And I'm telling you, they were ready. The truck was meant to leave with all the equipment to Sundance at like 10 in the morning, and they were ready at about 9 o'clock at night.
Wow. So he made you the goggles that you used at Sundance. Then he stole the concept and sold it to Facebook.
No. Palmer, on the contrary, Palmer was making goggles in his garage his whole life. He'll tell you about that, about being homeschooled, and not his whole life, but of course, when he was old enough to start making goggles, he was doing it in his garage.
Actually, I did talk to him about homeschooling, but that was a fiercely political, very interesting discussion. Besides the point, continue.
Anyway, so Palmer was there, but everybody contributed to fixing it. Evan Suma was there and was helping write the distortion code. Ty Fan is probably one of the most unsung heroes in this VR thing, who can just do everything. There was Bradley Newman, who was a great coder and really helped with a lot of all the graphics. There was John Brennan, who is an incredible mocap artist. And Julie Griffo, who was finishing up her MFA. So we had all these incredible people all in one place one summer. And because of that, I was able to get Hunger built. And for the first time, people understood that what I was trying to do about doing news in these immersive virtual spaces actually had validity, that this was a real way that news stories could be told.
Again, to stress this, these are goggles that at that point you threw out a number, something like $40,000 or something. The
first pair that Mark, we were using, the Wide 5, was like $40,000. I don't even know. There were tens of thousands of dollars. And then the goggles that Palmer and the crew at ICT made, there were a couple of $1,000s.
It's amazing. This is what happened in the music industry. It's happening with VR even faster than with recording and tracking and music production and film production.
Still, the cameras that I still use for people to track are very expensive, the face system, but that I'm sure will also go.
That's right. We get to that because you have to outfit the warehouse. Just sort of the basics. People may not understand this. The warehouse is just like a mocap studio. You have to outfit this with cameras.
Yeah. So you basically, like if you look at any kind of mocap, it's what I'm using. I'm just sort of doing it the reverse way. Instead of trying to get data to put on digital characters, I'm using it to track you so you can be inside with the story with the digital characters. I have to have enough cameras that you can walk around in the space freely, and it tracks wherever you go. And I mean that if you lie down, if you stand up, and if you, I had a major Hollywood cinematographer in my lab last Saturday. And it was great. He was on his back, like seeing what it looked like from all the different angles, I mean, with a total astonishment that he could, right?
Let's get back to the point. Now, you said about journalism, and this is one of those criticisms that I sometimes hear, and you must hear this too. But you said earlier, this is linear journalism piece, and you're standing there, you're observing. A lot of people uncomfortable with the stuff that you're doing would argue that it's not the place for a journalist to interfere. I mean, I have my own opinion on this, but how do you respond to this? Or do you ever hear criticisms like this?
Yeah, because, here, it kind of goes the other way, which is I've had I've had some of the gaming people say, but hang on a second, you don't have any agency to do anything here.
That's funny. Yeah, there's totally clash of cultures.
Yeah. And so they sort of kind of go, hey, but that's not what you do in games. You get to, do things. And I say, well, in my pieces, you're just watching the story unfold because guess what? That's really what happened. And there's room for that. There's room for linear narrative in virtual reality.
But do you think that the fact that you are forced to be, let's say, passive witness, then the most positive outcome could be that in your real life you think twice about stepping in a positive way than you actually do step in? Because you have had this experience where you're forced to be a passive person. Do you think that may lead to a more active?
I think why else would journalism exist? I mean, we report on these really difficult stories all the time. And why? To have more educated citizenry so that they can make decisions when they vote, when they act, when they think about their communities, what direction they want things to go.
I want to stick on this journalism thing because what drives me crazy is this fake, two sides of the story that they tend to really do here in the United States more than anywhere else in the world, I think.
Paul Krugman, who I quote, the tyranny of objectivity.
Right, exactly.
So things do happen in a certain way, and with
the project that you do, I mean, there is a side that you must take, just a moral side. There is no other way. If you take the other side, then essentially, excuse my French, you're an asshole.
So in use of force, where the San Diego coroner's office ruled it a homicide.
Okay, let's explain this thing. So this is at the Tribeca Film Festival. It showed there. What is this project?
Use of force tells the story of a man named Anastacio Hernandez Rojas, who had been brought to the U.S. as a teenager, lived in San Diego, never been in trouble with the law. He's now 42 years old, and he's, of course, been working construction because he has no papers. It's Mother's Day, and he has no money. It's during the downturn, and he steals a bottle of tequila and a steak for his wife. Gets caught, gets deported. They've got 5 kids, including young twins. He tries to sneak back in the country to help her. And he gets caught by the Border Patrol, gets roughed up by one officer who kicks his shins hard enough that Alejandro thinks his head and his ankle has been busted. He reports it to the supervisor, and rather than do anything about it, the supervisor lets the same officer who brutalized him take him out with his partner to a dark pen on the edge of the border. And pretty soon he, his partner, and multiple other officers get involved, and they beat him and tase him to death. The idea, they claim that he was resisting arrest or that he, hit them or kicked them or tried to do something. It took 2 years, but eventually some cell phone video and audio surfaced to show that, in fact, he had not resisted arrest at all. And there are more than a dozen Border Patrol and police officers surrounding him at the time of his death. And that's the piece I recreated, where you become a witness alongside these people who recorded the video. And the cell phone video, crucial evidence. And it's a little bit of an intense piece because you can't really, again, stop what's happening. But it does make this person seem human again. He's not just some distant victim, like some dirty migrant, this person who's just trying to sneak across the border into our country. He becomes a human being again.
This is so powerful what you're saying. So basically, you would say that this leads to compassion more so than adopting the attitude of fatalism and no matter what we do, it doesn't really matter. So I might as well sit on my butt and drink beer all day. Because I hear cynics say in my head, I hear them say, well, what's the point,
I had people going through this who were just kids who had no idea what was going on, why they were there. They just thought it was a cool virtual reality experience. They wanted to check it out. They didn't really know the story or anything. And afterwards, people, crying, really upset, shaken. And I gave people an opportunity to do 2 things with this piece, which was the first time I tried something a little bit unique. I had cards printed up so they could write to their senator. And I had a memorial to Anastacio Hernandez Rojas that people could tie notes to his family and hang them to a chain link fence with these images on it, these photographs on it, which I'm going to deliver to the family as a way to say, look, the world is not uncaring about this, that people have heard and seen your story, the story of your husband and father, and they care. But in that piece, I did something rather unusual, which is that I took the witness, one of the witnesses who recorded cell phone video, and I brought her to my lab. I body scanned her. I facial scanned her. I motion captured her with her body and her face walking through her memory of the night. She recreated her memory of the night herself. So instead of me sitting down in a chair and saying, so then what happened next? And then what happened next? And I have to recreate it. I had her recreate it with her own physical actions. And then we put that in the experience. When you're there with her feelings of the night. You don't embody her. She's next to you.
To the point of the compassion building, is that what you think is happening here? You see these people as human beings. You don't see them as a statistic or something, or some regrettable thing that you read in a headline.
I think when you're feeling like you're actually there as a witness on scene, people get a memory of the moment that they take with them. It's like as if they're actually there. And that feeling suddenly, it's no longer thinking about, oh, this person's just the other. And you suddenly understand that this is a man who's dying in front of you. And I think that really is a significant difference in the way that people are going to experience a news story. I guess think is the wrong word. I mean, I know that this is a different way to experience a news story. I was a correspondent for Newsweek. I wrote many text pieces. I've written for the New York Times and LA Times. I made documentary films. I've done the traditional routes for news telling. But doing it in virtual reality like this, sometimes I call it an empathy machine because it's so extraordinary the impact these stories have on people using fully immersive virtual reality versus, writing a story in the newspaper or seeing it on television. I feel like this is a really important way for people to get their news.
You said people get their news. Now we're at the juncture here that, where I'm a big fan of Second Life in the sense, yes, it's a walled garden, but it's more accessible than going to the Tribeca Film Fest. You have built these things in Unity, so you can, people can run this on their own machines. And so what does the future look like if we can pick up an Oculus at Costco and then we can go into your experience from home? Yes or no?
I think that there'll be ways to do these new stories in different levels. You'll have the kind of IMAX version, which is what I'm making right now, where you'll fully walk around and it'll be incredibly powerful. You'll have an Oculus version where you'll be sitting in front of your computer and coming home and kind of getting your incredible news stories that way. And then you'll have your mobile viewer experience, which ICT makes these incredible 3D printed mobile viewers you just slide your iPhone or your iPad into. And I think those are the kind of news stories you can get on the go. I described things like the Trayvon Martin case. That would have been a perfect mobile viewer story because the buildings are cookie cutter. You just model one building, bang, you're done. You can buy a car on Turbo Squid, like the one that George Zimmerman was sitting in for $100. It's rainy, it's dark, nobody knows exactly what happened. When I wanted to know the interior of those buildings, I just went on a real estate site and I found it very quickly. So basically you place people in the car with George Zimmerman in the rain, in the building, outside the building, seeing this dark hooded figure across the way, you're there. You feel like you're there. And you could do that on a mobile phone very quickly. So I think that the idea of doing news in virtual reality is a no-brainer. It's going to happen fast. The larger immersive experience, the immersive narrative, which I'm also working on some fictional stories, walking around stories, not necessarily even sitting at desk stories. Sitting down is obviously going to reach many, many more people. And I think people go to the movies because it's a different kind of experience.
No, I agree. If you could envision places that would have an outfitted room, a warehouse that you could go in and you plug into any number of experiences, some very escapism and some a little bit more sort of getting the good old noggin working, like the stuff that you're doing.
Or if you remember in movie theaters, they used to show the newsreels before they showed the movie.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. That would be a great scenario that might actually save a lot of movie theaters.
Location-based entertainment. There's no reason why that's not the future.
Okay, let's wrap this up quickly. The Syria project, what is that all about? Is that something you're working on?
What happened was basically the head of the World Economic Forum, Klaus Schwab, was brought to my lab by the dean of the cinema school, Elizabeth Daly, who's been a big supporter of my work. And he took off the goggles after experiencing hunger and turned to me and said, "Can you build something about Syria for our next meeting in Davos?" I kind of gulped, and Elizabeth said, "Of course we can." And I was like, okay, because we had such a short amount of time. But what an opportunity and what an incredible story. So for making these pieces, I need a kind of verite moment, a scene that would explicate what was going on. And I was particularly concerned about trying to illustrate how badly children are bearing the brunt of this Syrian conflict. More than 1 million kids in refugee camps. It's just really bad. So I was trying to find the right source material to build with, and things like, I reach out to this one Spanish photographer, and 20 minutes later, a tweet came out that he'd been kidnapped. I mean, it was just an incredible piece to be working on. In the end, I utilized footage from a moment of an audio from a moment where a bomb goes off in the streets in Aleppo. And then I had a team at a refugee camp that recorded, kids, this camp of 60,000, 30,000 are children. And I built kind of a story where I put you there when the bomb goes off in Aleppo, and also then I take you to the refugee camp to be among the children. That piece ended up being shown in Davos, and I put everybody from billionaires, John McCain, Peter Gabriel, the head of MIT Media Lab, Joe Ito, Tim Berners-Lee, the guy who's credited with founding the web. I mean, I had the most astonishing people go through the piece, and the results and the impact have been extraordinary. People who were saying that they're now doing direct deduct for money to help Syrian refugee kids. That piece is traveling to the Sheffield Documentary Film Festival in June, and then will be shown at a benefit at the Victoria and Albert Museum as well that month. It's already traveled to Hong Kong to raise money for people working in refugee camps. Head of the Red Cross and UNICEF and the UN, Human Rights, all say that this is the worst humanitarian crisis of our lifetime. Worse than Rwanda and worse than Bosnia, and yet nobody's paying attention. So at least in this way, a virtual reality piece is having impact and helping people understand what is going on who might otherwise not have spent time thinking about the Syrian conflict.
Really quickly, because I didn't quite understand it, maybe you said it, is that also you built the experience in Unity as well?
It was built in Unity.
Is this first-person view, or do you see your avatar a little bit, or hands, or how does...
You don't have a body in these places. You feel a bit like a ghost, but it doesn't seem to bother people because it basically... you're a witness. You're not a participant. Fully tracked. You can walk around fully tracked.
I'm just playing devil's advocate. Is this disaster porn? I mean, we're witnessing, we're sitting, I'm Peter Gabriel. I know I shouldn't single out Peter Gabriel because he does a lot and he has always done stuff. But let's just say I'm the head of Monsanto and I put these goggles and I go, oh my God, these poor kids, I got to donate a couple million.
It feels really different when you have an embodied presence on scene when the story unfolds, and it gives you a deeper understanding in a way that that I think can only help action, can only help. Why do we do this crazy thing called journalism when it's such crappily paid, and it's a really difficult profession and all those things? Is because you care about your world and you want people to understand, what's going on there to try to make it into a better place. And I think that these virtual reality pieces are really amazing new tool in the toolbox. I mean, I'm not saying that journalism, traditional journalism of radio and text and broadcast are going to go away. It's nothing like that. It's just another incredible way to tell these stories.
I was going to ask you about the length of your pieces, including the Syria piece. So they're fairly short, I would say. Do you envision to do something a lot longer, maybe?
I think as we get into making immersive narratives for the Oculus Rift, there's going to be a real opportunity to make longer and more involving stories. There's an individual named Oscar Raby whose piece I just witnessed that lasts about 10 minutes. And it's really coming to terms with the fact that his father was a major in the Chilean events and was basically a participant in a massacre of a number of people. He did an art piece, but it's a kind of amazing exploratory 10-minute piece to kind of come to terms with some of the issues. So, and that was 10 or 12 minutes, and I was pretty much fully engrossed throughout. So I think there's a lot of room for potentially doing longer pieces. And as we get the gear gets lighter, et cetera, I think we'll be doing longer walking around pieces as well, or fully tracked pieces.
You mean also in a wider virtual geographic area?
Sure. Once we get into bigger environments with more cameras. And then you also put multiple people in there at the same time. And that's going to be another interesting advance. We're already seeing that, in different places. So, and it's just a matter of how many motion tracking cameras you have available to you. That's what your only limitation is for how many people you have. So it's amazing, the things that are coming out. When I saw Oscar's piece this morning, he stayed with me last night and he showed me his piece this morning. And I just said, oh my God, this is the kind of explorations that virtual reality is going to allow that just no other medium has offered.
What piece are you talking about? We're on the radio. Nobody knows what you're talking about.
So it's Oscar Raby's piece called Ascent, and it will be at the Sheffield Documentary Film Festival with me. And it's the one in which he's exploring the knowledge that his father was a major in the Chilean military. What you're seeing is people are able to do this incredible 360 video, right? It doesn't have the real time, like you can't approach people and walk around it. Therefore the graphics are fixed. But once that gets married to the real time experience, and that's going to happen so fast because there's just clearly such a huge need and a huge audience. We're going to see the most amazing long-form stories be told, from personal ones like Oscar Raby's, where you end up back in the desert environment where the massacre occurred, using photo textures and geometry that's photoreal, to moving video. And to the kind of work that I've been doing, which is fully real time and using some of the top computer, CGI techniques that were once reserved for the motion picture industry. I'm now starting to apply it to these virtual reality immersive narratives. We're working on quick facial capture. I mean, that seems having facial animations that are believable in these spaces. That's happening really, really fast too. There's a lot of energy and a lot of companies working on that. So we're going to see a real development of technology that allows people to tell the kind of important stories that they've always told in this really, really immersive way.
And I think this comes back to the aspect of democratizing production tools, and tools become available for everyone to tell a story. And that's something that I'm totally excited about. What do you tell the journalists, though, that are afraid for their jobs? They want the old order back.
Yeah, no, those days are over with. But, as I told, somebody said to me, well, look, what's different about virtual reality this time around? And one of the things that I would suggest is it's being crowdsourced. There's so many people who now have access to tools and are learning how to use those tools. And you have to be, grateful to companies like, who made it available to the public, from Autodesk to Unity to Second Life to many locations that allow people the opportunity to make their own worlds. That now this time VR is able to get out of the laboratory and out to the world to tell fantastic stories.
And that was Nonny de la Pena. Her work is at immersivejournalism.com. We have a lot more links on the blog as well. I want to close with these final words. Let's hope there will one day be a platform or maybe a world that democratizes content creation and that puts her work in front of more people than just the folks that can afford or are invited to the World Economic Forum or the Sundance Festival for that matter. Well, some would argue that this world already exists. Anyway, so goodbye for now. Have a great week, everyone. And please, if you can, join us Sunday, June 22nd at 1 p.m. Second Life time at the SL11B Auditorium for a live show. Yes, Joe will be there too. Don't come just for me. Come for her. Come for me and stay for both of us. All right. Bye, everyone.
With Joe Yardley is a weekly production of Basic Drax Entertainment. The show is supported by Leap Motion, SL Go By On Live, Stitcher, Bot Girls Identity Circus, Carvel Design, Vika Creations, Humanoid Animations, Escapades, Botanical, Death Row Designs, Nantra, Angel Red Couture, Fallen Gods Incorporated, What's Next, Avacon, and Landscapes Unlimited. Contact the show via Skype, DraxFiles, Avatar DraxFiles, or email radio@draxfiles.com.